The first resource person we have with us today is Dr. Nandu Radhakrishnan. He is currently working as an associate professor and director, Voice Lab and Vocology Clinic, Lamar University, Texas. Dr. Nandu Radhakrishnan is an associate professor and director of the Voice and Vocology Clinic at the Department Speech and Hearing Sciences, Lamar University. He is a core faculty in the Certificate on Vocology program. He received his doctorate at the Bowling Green State University, Ohio, and completed his clinical fellowship at the University of Pittsburgh Voice Center, Pennsylvania. His areas of specialty include clinical, professional, and performance voice issues. He has published chapters and articles related to voice science and has conducted national and international workshops related to assessment and intervention of voice. Dr. Nandu Radhakrishnan recently published a novel voice therapy technique called nasal resistance and is currently investigating the efficacy of this technique on clinical population. He is a member of various organizations, including the Voice Foundation, Pan American Vocology Association, and Voice and Speech Trainers Association. Apart from his profession, he is a stage artist, playwright, a YouTuber, and a hobby chef. So, sir will be addressing the topic title, Effect of COVID-19 on Speech and Hearing Training Programs from the Academic Perspective. I welcome you to today's program, sir.
Thank you very much, Sanjana.
Yes, sir. The next resource person, can I continue introducing?
Yes.
Yeah. The next resource person we have with us today is Dr. Ayaskanta Raut. He's currently serving as the professor and program director, audiology, James Madison University, USA. He holds an academic rank of tenured full professor in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders at James Madison University. In his current role, he is engaged in teaching graduate students and conducting research in the areas of audio signal processing, hearing aid technology, hearing aid user satisfaction, and benefit. In addition to his academic role, Dr. Raut is responsible for providing leadership to the doctoral program in audiology. He obtained his PhD from Purdue University and his master's and bachelor's degrees in speech and hearing sciences from India. He has published and presented his research on topics pertaining to hearing aids and cochlear implants. Sir will be addressing the topic, Effect of COVID-19 on speech and hearing training programs from the administrative perspective. I welcome you also, sir.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. The next resource person we have with us today is Dr. Haya Datta. She's currently serving as the Assistant Professor and Undergraduate Director, Communication Sciences and Disorders, Molly College, New York, USA. Her research interests include finding out how we use our brains to learn language as infants and children, and how we become efficient in this process as adults. Her work focused on how brain organizes and manages multiple languages, that is how the bilingual or multilingual brain functions, as well as what happens to communication when the brain deviates from typical development. Recently, she has also become interested in understanding issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion within culturally and linguistically diverse populations and minoritized communities in the world. Ma'am will be addressing the topic, Effect of COVID-19 on speech and hearing training programs from the clinical aspect or clinical training point of view. I welcome you today to today's session, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. May I request Dr. Nandu to take over?
Yes, thank you very much once again. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Let me share my screen and my PowerPoint here. Okay. Is my window visible there at your end?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. All right, thank you once again to our JSS committee and to the management, especially Dr. Nataraja, who gave me this opportunity to be here with you all. And as pointed out, is it different from what we are facing in India and what we face here in the United States or any other part of the world? Let's talk about from an American perspective and compare that with the scenario back down there in India. Effect of COVID-19 on speech and hearing training programs, and I'm going to share from an academic perspective, which does have a shade of clinics as well, because clinics are considered to be part of an academic training program. This is from one of the publications here, which says that there is a steady decline in enrollment in all the programs. This is anything after higher secondary school. So college enrollments have declined 2.5% in 2020, which is definitely more than what was seen in 2019. Higher education lost about 400,000, which is 4 lakhs of students last year. And some of this is also part of the lack of international students. There has been a decrease in students coming from an international background due to visa reasons or fear of travel and all these. So colleges and universities have faced the blow of having a decrease in enrollment. And once the enrollment decreases, that also brings the financial side and the reputation of an institution significantly. Let me give a broad perspective of how we function here, and you can compare that to what we have in India. Traditionally, that is pre-COVID, for speech and hearing graduate program, at least a 2-year program, the first year, which is 3 semesters, would be of classes and clinics that are on campus, face to face. And this will be followed by another year or at least 2 semesters of externship, where the students go to schools, hospitals, nursing homes, or private setups that have established relationship with the department, and they get supervised by a clinical supervisor at that site. Now, there have been traditional online schools for speech and hearing, but they were not looked upon as better institutions or as the first approach for a student to go and take a speech and hearing degree from that online institution. That was the past, that was before COVID. And a regular classroom setup or regular classes before COVID was face-to-face, just like how we have in India. You have a professor in class teaching using PowerPoints, videos, audios, and hands-on experiences for lab activities. And clinics, again, are either at schools or departmental clinics, and you have one supervisor who has to be supervising the student at least 50% of the time. And with the traditional approach, we had good feedback with students. Like I could be with my student and give real-time feedback either in the class by asking questions or being in the clinic and observing the patient and the student clinician and offer my thoughts about how the therapy session should have been. Or I could have office hours where the student would walk into my room. We sit one-on-one and talk about how the session went or what problems he or she is facing in the classroom. And while doing this, we had less distraction about where we are. We were on campus, inside the office, there's nothing much to get distracted. And the labs and clinics are pretty close. So if I have to take the student back to my lab and show with a hands-on approach, I could do that right away. And as we all know, giving a positive feedback or a reinforcement to learning, it will definitely enhance learning. And a good example for how being close and training a student is this. So giving a feedback right away to the student is definitely helpful. Thanks, Hia. Now let's take a look at the pandemic version where everything is online, where you're sitting in front of your computer or laptop and you're talking to thousands of people across the globe. Online lectures have been managed by virtual learning management systems. A good example that we use are Blackboard, Canvas. This has already been used in our traditional setup where we use that primarily as setting up PowerPoint slides, putting our syllabus online, and giving the handouts before class for students. So students would go online, download their slides, or watch any video prior to the classroom setup, and they would bring their laptops or print their slides and sit with us in a classroom. Now, this took over as a virtual environment where we could time the downloading or deploying of slides, and on a timely basis, the students can go in, log in, access the class, and watch videos, or can also have an asynchronous class or a synchronous class where both the student and the faculty can be online at the same time. Clinics, on the other hand, have become more of a simulated version or a teletherapy version where we rely on software and programs that are artificial intelligence based, where one can learn by looking at a 3D image of the larynx. One can learn by playing through a clinic session that was pre-recorded and has been artificially enhanced based on what questions you're supposed to ask and what answers you might get from the patients. This is thriving now, and one of the most commonly used software is Simucase or Simucase.com. And here is an example for that. Let me first play what a traditional class looked like and how closely the students interacted with each other.
You already got it in. Yes, but we didn't use it on this. Oh, I get it now.
So that was the traditional setup where we saw students interacting with the faculty and among themselves and learning from each other. And here is an example of the Simucase version, and I'm going to.
Then we'll click Start. And then we have the option to start in learning mode or start in assessment mode. Here we see that Kelly's 7 years old. She's been having difficulty learning to read. She's in the 2nd grade at a private school. Her mother is seeking additional information and is requesting a comprehensive speech and language evaluation at your private practice. And then we'll hear from Kelly.
Hi, my name is Kelly and I'm 7 years old.
So we want to start with our case history. So we're going to interview Kelly's mom and begin to compile some information.
Hi, I'm Kelly's mom. I'm not able to make today's evaluation, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
So you can ask questions in any of these areas, and we'll start with identifying family information.
Great. So that is a quick clip of Simucase that is talking about where a student can explore based on how to assess a patient or even to offer treatment. We use this as an additional mode of training, but now this has taken over to be the primary one where you have several clients that are being downloaded there based on the particular disorder that you want to research or you want to teach our students. There are, of course, pros and cons to this approach that we have been facing. Initially, I would say before we get to the pros and cons, when this pandemic struck the world, just like anywhere in any part of the world, we thought that this is just going to be a short period. So we took it really easy, at least for the first 2 months. We thought that we're going to go back to classes, we can catch up, and we did not put too much load on the students. So it was more like a paid vacation for all of us here. But once we realized that this is going to be the new normal, we started gearing up and getting more into the online mode and giving an online presence to our courses. The pros here are that the flexibility for both parties, for students and for faculty. You do not have to be on campus. You do not have to drive, especially for me, it's an hour and a half drive from home to office. So that can be minimized. So I can sit in my office and at home and then talk to my students, present my PowerPoints. Similarly, students need not drive to school, need not have a 8 to 4 session blocked just for classes. They can work if they can, and they can take care of other businesses that they have, as well as attend a class and get their degrees. Online credit hours or online courses are also cheaper or less expensive than on campus because of all the fees involved. Now, when it comes to cons, learning curve to adapt to an online environment is not the same for all. Even in this smartphone age, there are students who struggle to handle a computer and to use the software or to work on PowerPoints and other aspects. Many of the students, especially since they lost their parents or others lost their jobs, they had to work, and they took advantage of this one and worked full time and tried to take classes online. Now, this messed up with their time management. Most of the teachers, at least in the beginning, we wanted to keep it synchronous, where if the class begins at 12:45, we expected students to be there through Zoom at 12:45 and be with us for that an hour and a half. Later on, we developed the asynchronous mode where we recorded the lectures and then uploaded it. But then we had to have a in-class meeting through Zoom where we had to answer questions. So a faculty who's putting in, let's say, 2 hours of work for their class, for that particular class, now has to put at least 4 or more, depending on how many students can make it at that particular time. So for me, example, I have one class that I teach, graduate voice disorders. And if it was on campus, it would just be 3 hours a week. Now I've recorded my lecture, I put it online, but I meet with the same 30 students in 3 batches because each one has a different work schedule. Lack of college culture, which is the most important for a college going student, is to be in that learning environment, learn from the faculty, and have the support from the cohort and learn from each other. That is something that is part of the learning process, which these students are missing. They're all isolated in their own island, and they're getting the content, yes, but they're not getting that share and warmth that they would have got if it was on campus. Working from home for faculty is not easy. Working from home becomes working for home. Especially in my case, my wife is an essential worker. She's a speech pathologist as well. She has to go to the nursing home to work, and she comes back after 8 hours. And I'm here teaching those 8 hours, but she comes back home and tells, "Oh, you're at home, you don't do the laundry. Wait, you're staying home, you could have done the dishes." So it is a complete burnout for either of the spouses, male or female. One working from home becomes working for home. And of course, you have kids who are at home, so you are a school teacher as well. So during the daytime, you're a professor, and in the evenings, you're a school teacher. And that takes a toll on your voice, especially because you are talking all the time. The most important factor that I have tried to work around is competence evaluation for students. It is easy for me to share my slides. I've recorded my videos. I've edited the videos, enhanced the videos, given more information, downloaded some from YouTube, made a professional teaching video. But now, if it was an on-campus class, the exams will be right in front of me, and I would see them dealing with acoustic analysis or endoscopic evaluations, and I would see what they're doing and rate their competence. But now everything is online, so the examination approach has to be extensive. I have to make sure that they deal with a lot of theory by looking into research articles. So grading becomes more difficult. So that's become a time-consuming approach. And several of our faculty have noticed that we have become lenient in grading because it's the pandemic world. And also from a student's perspective, there is a tendency for them to cheat because even though you have proctoring software where the screen gets locked, they can only look at their exams. You could have another laptop right behind that with the answers there. And I've also had students who would send their exams as Word documents, but I do have a way to go back and look where that Word document came from. And 3 students sent the same Word document that came from the same computer. So there you go. I would like to share some students' perspective here. I have one American student and a couple of Indian students. I'm going to play what they wanted to say about how this pandemic has affected their speech and hearing program. So let's listen to Jordan.
Hey there. So, I want to discuss a few pros and cons that I have experienced regards to COVID-19 and my graduate class and program. So, I want to start off with the pros. There are definitely pros and cons, but the main pros that I have found during this transition is that I enjoy watching and zooming in online for home because it is less travel for me, as it takes about 30 minutes for me to drive to and from class. So it's really easy for me to just get on my computer in the kitchen and log on and log off and go about my day instead of having to take more time to drive there, do my class, and then come back. I also think it's really cool how my class had to learn how to do teletherapy, which is something that is not actually taught in the program, as well as a lot of the professors have not done teletherapy either. So that was a big switch. I would say it was a pro and con because it is definitely a learning curve, learning how to navigate through teletherapy and doing that. And I also feel like another pro would be that we have learned to become extremely flexible, as some things don't always turn out the way you expect them, so you always have to be flexible, and I think that's really important in our field is flexibility. So some of the cons that I have, for one, the shorted experience of the in-depth learning in person or face-to-face in the classroom. I feel like it was definitely taken away from us, especially coming in. Like, we started out all online, so we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know how the professors would be with it and that kind of thing. So I feel like during conversation on Zoom, it's definitely not the same as in person because everyone is just kind of in the moment wanting to get the class over and going on about the day. As whereas if you were face to face, then you would have more time for that in-depth discussion about whatever topic that you're learning at the moment. Another one is the learning dynamic. In a classroom, you are solely focused, there's minimal distractions, whereas at home, you have dogs barking in the background, you have other things going on, sometimes other people going around in the house talking, and it's easily distracting compared to as if you were in a classroom where your sole focus was on the professor and what you were learning that day. And the last thing, a big con that I have found is that you definitely have to self-teach yourself more. So I feel like I have not had enough education on the classes that I have taken due to having to self-teach, and things that I don't understand we never really discuss. So I just feel like my learning experiences have been kind of shortened, and I was just taught to basically learn like the basic level of information that we needed.
So that gives
Hey
us,
there. So I want to
let
discuss
me,
a few
Hi
pros and
everyone, my
cons
name
that I
is
have.
okay. Online exams, especially for students who have gone through online classes, it is devastating. And this is a good example of how students would face an online exam. When it comes to online classes, they assume that the exams are going to be easy, but to test their competence and to offer a degree is one of our job requirements. So we cannot compromise on making the exam too easy, but the students did expect that, at least for the first batch of COVID-19. They just wanted to get through the class and get their degree and walk out. But we have a promise to the profession to keep it high up. So we had several students who had failed their classes and had to retake that. Now, when all this is over, especially now, well, not over yet, but next semester onwards, we have been asked to be on campus and teach face-to-face, and here is a faculty perspective. We are not ready. I am not ready to drive an hour and a half again after staying home for almost a year and a half. Hang in there. It's not too far, and I just cannot wait for this pandemic to be over. And when it is over, I'm going to take a week's vacation and go to my office and stay there. Be positive, stay negative. Thank you, JSS, once again, and to all those who are there patiently listening to me.
Thank you, sir. You in your address, you explained how technology has played a savior in this pandemic situation. You also very brilliantly mentioned and gave us a real-time feedback on how the virtual learning management system and simulated clinics have helped you in continuing academics. Thank you very much, sir. I now request Dr. Ayaskant Raut to kindly take over.
Good morning, everybody. Good evening to all of you in India. That was a wonderful summary, Nandu. I really enjoyed watching the movie clips. It's been a while, and it's fun. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about COVID-19 and its impact on speech and hearing programs from an international administrative perspective. And like Nandu said, academic, clinic, administration, it's all intertwined. You cannot talk about one without talking about the other. So I will probably touch on some of the areas that Nandu has already talked, and probably Hia will talk after me. So we'll, and I've set my clock to 15 minutes. I'll see, because once I start talking, I keep talking. Let's go ahead. So the agenda, I'll talk about the COVID timeline a little bit. It's all the same for you in India, for us here, but it'll be good to reflect back on the last year and impact on the pandemic as an administrative perspective. We'll talk about enrollment, financial burden, physical space management, transition to virtual learning, clinical hours, and finally, I was really hoping to talk for a minute about how it has affected what I do in audiology clinic, hearing aid dispensing, hearing aid research. So I have only 2 slides on that. Okay, so let's get started. So the timeline wise, so this is showing our timeline from 2019, when somewhere in November-ish, with the first case in China was reported. In our first case in the United States was reported somewhere in January. So at that point, nobody had any idea what to do. So we kept continuing actually with that semester. But by March, it was pretty clear that it is scary and dangerous to bring back 25,000 students to campus. So everything went virtual, okay? And by March 2020. That was a time you probably will remember, PPEs, your mask, your face shield, those were in short supply. So it was very difficult for people to accumulate enough supplies to keep physical functioning in classroom, clinic, et cetera, et cetera. So everything shut down. And like Nandu was talking, we went to virtual mode. And that time, actually, administratively, we had to think about, because when you think about students and faculty, everybody was at a different level. Some people had never heard of Zoom. Some people had never heard of WebEx or WhatsApp is not popular in the US. So it was very difficult trying to get everybody on board to have a, standard platform to launch the online program. So that was the biggest issue going from mid-March to maybe end of May when the semester ended. So the summer of 2020 is when administratively we started thinking, okay, we survived the pandemic semester. What do we do now? Okay, so a lot of planning started for, can we start in-person clinic, in-person class, and so on. There was a plan A. In administration, as all of you know, there will be a plan B, plan C, and throw a Hail Mary if nothing works. So we had so many plans ready, but luckily our plan A kind of worked, which was to go into a hybrid mode and start working and launch large undergraduate classes in virtual mode, graduate classes, both speech pathology and audiology, in person in end of August, and clinic, particularly audiology clinic, was partial open, okay, but mostly with telehealth. So we survived the fall semester of 2021. And then when the COVID vaccines were available, I was lucky to be one of the first people in the Commonwealth of Virginia to get COVID vaccine. I don't know why, but I got the call and I went there and got my vaccine. But by February, most of our faculty were vaccinated. So we just finished our spring semester academic year, and we had fully in-person clinic and in-person classes, and with all the restrictions you need to have. So that's the guideline. And now we are looking forward to August when the semester opens to have as normal a semester as possible. Okay, so that's the timeline. Let's take a quick look at, it is very interesting to look at the Johns Hopkins data. And as an administrator, you have to keep an eye, not only in your local area, but your global data, because the world is flat. So if you look at this graph, I'll show you several panels. The x-axis is the same. That means it starts from November 2019 till today. Okay, and this data was downloaded yesterday, day before yesterday, from Johns Hopkins. So this is China. On the y-axis is the number of cases they reported. Okay, and the panels I'll show you will be slightly different because I have not normalized. But take a look at India. Okay, we just saw our biggest spike there, and the y-axis, mind you, the scale is very different. Okay, the y-axis for India is going to 600,000 cases, 6 lakh cases, and for China was 20,000 max. Okay, so I didn't have time to normalize the scales. This is the United States. So keep an eye on basically the waves. This is rest of the world. Okay, so when you're thinking about the pandemic, you are keeping an eye on your local and state level cases. But at the same time, you have on your peripheral vision what else is happening in neighboring states and other countries. Okay, because this pandemic doesn't have a boundary. It could cross any time, anywhere. And just to point out, New Zealand, no, it didn't have many cases. The y-axis is only 100 as opposed to 600,000 or 6 lakh in case of India. So I apologize, I have not normalized the y-axis. So this gives us a perspective. Now, let's go back to my points. Impact of COVID on enrollment. Nandu showed you some numbers, and I'm just giving you the big picture. Interestingly, when you look at speech and hearing programs in the United States, this is CAPCID data, that there is actually not a significant impact on number of enrollments. So that means if we had 25 people in a speech program, master's program, There were 25 people in 1920, academic year 1920. Okay, but what happened was the number of applicants to get into the program dropped by 18%. 19 for 2019-20. For this admission cycle that is starting in a couple of months, we came back to normal. Why? Because many universities in the United States actually said, we do not require GRE for applications. So that helped a lot of applicants to apply. But there was a significant drop in the number of international students, particularly from China and other parts of Asia, for various factors that I won't go into, that involves political as well as the pandemic. So when you look at international students for speech and hearing, usually it is the graduate students. We don't get a lot of international students at undergraduate levels in the US. So graduate level, it was okay, but there was drop in the numbers. Okay. How about financial burden? When you talk about administration, there are three things when you're planning for unknown events like this pandemic. Nobody had any idea that it was going to be 2 years of wretched plan A, plan B, plan C, still not sure what's going on. So you're thinking about finance, resource people, your personnel, and product, your service, either your teaching, your clinic, everything. So all three were intertwined. So when at US universities, as you all know, it is based on whether it's a private university or a state university like James Madison University. A lot of the money, revenue comes from enrollment. Students pay tuition to be here. So now low enrollment, low revenue. So then the administrators scratch their head where to get the money and how to divvy up and reallocate resources. So there were temporary budget cuts across the board. There was no travel. You can't go to conferences. Of course, there were no conferences anywhere. No, I got an email one day, you cannot buy pizza. I'm like, yeah, that's $1 million. For $10, you try looking for bigger budget cuts. But they were across the board. So we had to cut the budget by 15%. But it's come back to normal now. Tuition, another problem that we faced was as soon as the university went into virtual mode, guess what? We had to refund the money to the students that went back home. So whatever hostel fees or dorm fees and boarding, lodging fees they had paid, partial money had to be refunded. So that was a lot of lost revenue. Tuition, when you go from in-person class to a hybrid or online mode, the tuition rates are different. So you had to find out the difference and refund the money. Otherwise, lawsuits are everywhere in the US. So you have to be careful about that. So that was a lot of hassle. Then we had to spend a lot of money to retrofit our buildings to implement social distancing. Okay, so there were large expenses to upgrade the internet bandwidth to deliver lectures. Okay, if you are delivering simulated lectures and you want to play a video, if you don't have the right bandwidth, it is going to be a problem, not only from the faculty and university side, on the student side, wherever they were. Okay, so it was a battle of bandwidths, basically, particularly in my home. My kids were learning their virtual learning. I was teaching, my wife was doing her work. So the bandwidth was a big problem, internet bandwidth. And then the universities, every university had to spend a lot of money to get additional software site licenses. For example, when Zoom was free without a license, it would cut off about what, 35 minutes or something. Then you have to restart. That was not ideal. So the universities had to pay money so that they don't get spam calls or protection, security, and unlimited duration. So that was all expensive stuff. So financial burden was a lot. but looking at it positively, the nice thing is now we are set up for the future. Like Dr. Rajshekhar had written on the chat, it is an opportunity for us. Okay, if anything, the pandemic created a level playing field, and it brought up several faculty members who were reluctant to embrace technology. Now they zoom in and out. That is amazing. So I was just talking about facility management. So in our building, what we did was we had to do entry one way from the left side, okay, exit on this side, and the right side was the clinic entry. So there was no cross traffic anywhere. So many things. And the labs are all on the 5th floor, so on the 6th floor, so nobody bothered us. But there was a lot, and still we are in there, in that mode. Okay, clinical hours. Those of you follow ASHA guidelines know that ASHA has allowed, I'm sure Hia will talk about it, for SLPs. It is required 350 clinical hours total to get your ASHA certification. 75 hours can be in simulation mode. For audiology, the entire 10% of all clinical experience can be through simulation. Okay, so quick pivot in the last minute. How has hearing aid dispensing and fitting changed as a result of COVID? Well, a couple of studies just to show you that there is an effect of mask, right? So my friend Sam Atcherson just published a paper in JASA showing that the frequency effect of the speech sound that comes out of the mouth as a result of different masks. So the top panel is masks. The bottom panel is the face shields with the plastic thing on top of it. And the lines, the curves show how much it is different from no mask at all. So if the lines are flat at 0, if you had a flat line at 0, there's no difference. Okay, if you have a drop, that means that's where you have not enough amplification or sound coming out. And if you look at it, most problems are high frequencies. And what happens? High frequency carries the intelligibility. So you sound muffled with the mask. So now somebody wearing hearing aids, listening to a person with a mask is a problem because all you hear is this. So now hearing aid companies started making a face mask program and giving you some examples from Signia, Phonak, Starkey, and everybody else kind of created a program for face masks. So it gives additional gain at certain frequencies. And the National Acoustics Laboratories in Sydney came out with guidance. So about 2 to 6 dB above 1000 hertz, depending on frequencies. Okay, so finally, with all this, I think we have kind of turned the corner. Okay, and we are looking forward, at least from administrative perspective, to the new semester in August when we have taken these experiences, okay, and learn from it for a better audiology program. Okay, so I think that's all I have. I will shut up here. That's all I have. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for brilliantly explaining the various hurdles that you had to face as an administrator and also explicitly mentioning the solutions that you used to overcome the same. It was also very interesting to note the acoustic effects of PPE in your presentation, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I now request Dr. Hayadatta to take over. Dr. Hayadatta will be speaking about both the theoretical as well as clinical aspects. Over to you.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to say my name is Hia Datta.
Yeah. Okay.
So that,
yeah.
Okay. So thank you to both Aishkant and Nandu for their wonderful presentations, and those were great and kind of nicely set up before me to understand what I'm going to say. So let's see. And you're able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, so I just wanted to begin by saying two things. One is that some of the materials that I was going to cover was already covered by Nandu and Aishkant, so I'm not going to repeat them. And I'm going to look at my time here so that I'm as good as Dr. Raut in delivering my talk. The second thing I want to mention is the size of universities and colleges in the US, just like in India, vary. And it seems to me both Dr. Radhakrishnan and Dr. Raut are from big public universities with a lot of students, and I'm not sure what of their class sizes. However, I come from a small private college. It's called Molloy College. On the right, you see the entire campus. It's about 5,000 students, and this is like our front building. This is our main campus. We have some satellite campuses. But for you to imagine what it's like to be here, the size of our campus, I would say is like Aish, if not a little smaller. The actual main campus, the physical campus. Okay. So I'm going to talk first a little bit about clinical training, and then I'll say something about academic training and go into some challenges and some positives. The clinical, we have two programs, the BSc program, which we call BS, and the MSc program, and our clinical requirements for both programs are different. Typically, in bachelor's programs in US, there are no clinical requirements, but in our program, we do have clinical requirements for our students. The first one, which is a 25 hours of observation in the field, is an ASHA requirement going into the master. So we have our bachelor students do that. But the second requirement, 2 semesters of supervised therapy, that's something that we do on an internal basis at our college in the communication science and disorders department, not mandated by any external organization. So like Dr. Radhakrishnan was saying, we resorted to pre-recorded video sessions instead of live observations that our students have to do in the field because no live observations were happening. And I'll show you what site we use for that. It's called masterclinician.org. And it's actually a very nice tool for teaching as well, because faculty can get, at least US faculty are able to get free accounts on it. And we got free accounts for students when this all started in March. So that was very nice. And then the 2 semesters of undergraduate or BS therapy in the final year for our students, in spring 2020, we moved completely to teletherapy only. And all of this for our bachelor students were on campus, meaning they're only at the university clinic. And then in summer, fall, and spring, we were able to move in some in person, but mostly telepractice, gradually becoming a more like 50-50 sort of thing coming up to now. Now, the master's requirements are stricter. That's what mostly I'm imagining Dr. Radhakrishnan was talking about, and Dr. Raut too. And those are mandated by the American Speech Language Hearing Association. So we don't have autonomy over how we do things with that. So what we require for our students is 350 supervised clinical hours, and then 50 hours can be transferred from our bachelor's programs, clinical work that our students do. So in reality, for all programs, master's students require 400 supervised clinical hours. And this, like Dr. Radhakrishnan said, is distributed over our university clinic, which is the Molloy College Speech Language Hearing Center, adult externships, and pediatric externships. And if you followed his presentations, you would have seen some of these things come up on his slide. And I'll just say that we also have access to private rehab centers and private practices where our students can go and do their externships, which are for 2 semesters. So in our program, unlike Dr. Radhakrishnan's, we do theory and clinicals throughout the 2 years of our master's program. But in different semesters, students do either in-house clinic, they are out at an adult externship placement outside the college, or at a pediatric placement outside the college. And I don't particularly mention private practice because those actually helped us out during the pandemic year. So the Council for Academic Accreditation, which mandates all our rules and how we provide clinical training, put out some advice during the early time, during March 2020, which they kept revising. And as it stands, that there was no reduction in the 350/400 clinical hours that our master's students have to have. But what they said was they can now earn these hours through teletherapy. And this accommodation began in January 2020. They have extended it to December 31st, 2021 for now. And they said that they can 75 of these hours can be used through simulated observation of simulated cases, like Dr. Radhakrishnan was showing. So, and then of course we had to have the 25 hours of guided observation, but now we were able to do that just through video recordings, right? So these were how we did some of these things. This is just a picture on the left. It's a pretty hazy picture, but it shows a student giving therapy using Zoom to one of the clients. So here's a brief overview of how this was managed for us. So for except for spring 2020, we actually ran in-person therapy, although a small number of patients came. So reduced number of patients, reduced number of in-person therapy. We were able to run this from summer last year up until now. So these were some of the things that we had to prepare for in accommodating our clinic to patients who would come in for person. So we resorted to transparent masks so that the patients could see our faces. All patients, students, faculty had to fill out health questionnaires. There were temperature checks and kiosks outside on every floor of buildings. Social distancing, of course, had to be maintained both in waiting rooms and in clinic rooms. Students and faculty had to disinfect every surface before they started and after they finished. We had to offer fewer sessions and manage these transitions. All faculty and students who were involved in these had to take a number of telehealth seminars and workshops and find resources for it. And then we had to have the supervisors also take training so that they're better able to supervise our students. So just to be clear, our clinic ran, I would say, in spring 2020, no in-person sessions, or so 100% teletherapy sessions. Up until now, we are at, I would say, 80-20 in terms of in-person versus teletherapy, 20% in-person and 80% teletherapy at the college clinic, right? And we were able to maintain some level of 20 to 25% in-person therapy throughout from last summer until now. So some students actually got both experiences, graduate students mostly got both experiences, and some undergraduate students as well, which was a lot of work on our, on the part of our clinic director and clinical coordinator to manage this. In terms of, just looking at the time, in terms of externship, mostly teletherapy, like I said, at Malloy College Speech Language Center. And we're talking about spring 2020 to summer 2020 now. So in order to meet that master student hours requirement, the 350 hours that they had to meet, we now did resort last year, spring, to the 75 hours of simulations, but they still had to get the rest of the hours in person. Now, in the past, this was a change we made personally in our program. In the past, even though ASHA allowed a number of hours to be simulated therapy, we hadn't allowed that in our program, but we had to make that accommodation last spring. From last spring into summer, number of externships in person dwindled both in hospitals and in schools. And schools and private practice and rehab centers, both for adults and for children, quickly resorted to telehealth. However, hospitals, as you can imagine, did not transition to telehealth at any time. So a lot of the adult experience that the student had to get during those times had to be either at our clinic or at private rehab centers where they were able to hold these telehealth sessions. But our students were able to graduate, all our students were able to graduate on time. So we had a full class graduating in 2020 on time in May with all their clinical hours that they needed to complete, both on campus and in externships. So moving on to fall 2020 and part of summer going into this year, now we're comfortably settled into a combination of teletherapy in person and in-person sessions at the in-house clinic, which is the Speech Language Hearing Center. We have regained a lot of the externship sites, which are now allowing students to come in. But externships, meaning these schools and private practice, are still running telehealth sessions. So students are still doing a combination of teletherapy as well as in-person therapy. So some students may get both experiences. Some students might have had only telehealth experience. But coming into this year, I think all students were able to get some in-person experience, at least in the master's classes. And so going into the fall, we are being sent vaccination requirements from these sites, both from the hospitals and perhaps from the schools as well. And we are still, as a college, thinking about what our vaccination requirements will be for students and faculty. However, a lot of faculty and students have already vaccinated on their own. When I say requirements, I'm talking about what rules we will have to follow regarding vaccination. So these are the two resources I was talking about. And on the left is the Master Clinician Network. I can show you how that looks like in 1 minute. Let me just go to the next slide. And these are some resources that students liked using during teletherapy, and taking a number of workshops and doing a lot of reading on how to get this done. So let me just stop share for 1 moment so that I can show you what Master Clinician looks like. So it's, like I said, free for faculty, but a paid subscription for students. And on the left, you can see they have various disorders on which they have pre-recorded video. So here's one.
Today I'm going to work with Shirley, who's an 81-year-old woman.
Can you hear?
Who suffered a stroke about a little less than 2 years ago. And she was a very active woman who loved to golf and be with. Okay, so first I'm just going to have you point to things. Can you point to the pencil? Okay, great, good job. Point to the safety pin. Okay, point to the fabric. Point to the thread. Point to the tape. Yeah. Point to the marker.
So as you could tell there, that was a patient who has aphasia, and the therapist was doing some kind of a single word comprehension task. And there are different lengths of the session, and you can have students watch a subsection of the session and create clips, and you can put in targeted questions with each of the videos that students can answer. So which I love this resource. I use it in my classes as well. So this is what we use for the 25 hours of observation required for all our students in bachelor's. So going back to this. Okay, so I did have just a little bit about academic training as well. We had, like Dr. Radhakrishnan said, all three modalities of classes: online synchronous, hybrid, and in-person. Online synchronous was what we're doing now. That's online synchronous class. We held it through Zoom. Hybrid was when we had the asynchronous online class that Dr. Radhakrishnan described, along with in-person classes. But we still left a few in-person classes for all students, not in spring 2020, but going forward from fall 2020 to spring 2021. And this is in our hopes to have some kind of, camaraderie between students. They're feeling that they can come to class, that they're actually going to a college, because this was a big deal for our students. Like, they kind of felt that they were not even going to college, particularly the younger students who had just joined the program and, didn't even know who their classmates were. So I also wanted to mention some research challenges, since that's part of academia and also part of our training. So the biggest issue was our International Review Board, which manages all the ethics of research, stopped all in-person research in terms of data, all in-person research period, but in particular data collection, of course. So that, created some waves in many, many places. We do not have a PhD program, but maybe Dr. Raut and Dr. Radhakrishnan's programs do. So I'm sure there were big challenges there. For student research, all our BS students do a research thesis, which is 1 year long. And in spring 2020, everything was ready to go, and then COVID happened. So they couldn't collect data. So I teach that class. So I had them simulate the data. So there were no real data. But this year, we became clever, and we tried to, sort of skirt that issue by doing experimental studies over Zoom. We used YouTube recording data analyses. I mean, one student used hearing a noise simulator to do some kind of research on how speech and noise, speech perception and noise kind of task using this noise simulator. So we got around to it, or online surveys, and students were very innovative and clever in sort of getting around this. And then faculty research also was greatly affected. We could continue things like grant writing and such, but people had to come up with innovative data collection solutions, software, which were encrypted in privacy so that patient privacy was preserved. And across the country, there was no lab access in many programs. So I had put out some of these challenges in academic and clinical training. This slide is about the academic challenges, and because the other speakers already spoke about a number of them, I just highlighted a few. For example, students would miss class due to quarantining and actually disappear. Like, they wouldn't show up on Zoom classes for, say, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and emails and phone calls, nothing. Some of it was due to their actually being sick and families affected, and others included just not being able to keep that connection and rigorous college mentality sort of alive. Aishkan spoke about budget cuts. We've had 35% budget cuts. So, pizza out the window, or any food, even if it was student related. Zoom fatigue was a real thing. We also had problems with students not having good online connection for class and for clinics, wireless connection or space. So this is something I'm very interested in hearing about from India, how this was managed in terms of learning from home. Our students, some of them had small homes, no rooms. We had a lot of challenges having the camera on. I mean, my class would sometimes look like this, how it looks now. And that's hard because you don't know what is going on. I mean, one doesn't know what is going on the other side, no matter what. But when the camera is off, it's even harder. And then this last piece I wanted to touch base on, we hadn't planned for high flex classes, and high flex is what it says here. High flex classes combine elements of both online classroom-based learning and classroom-based learning. They take hybrid courses to a new level of flexibility. It really means that if you want to come to class in person, you can. If you want to take classes online on Zoom, you can. If you want to take classes online asynchronously, meaning you're not online at all, but you do the work on your own, you can. And you can change which week, which day you want to do this. So we hadn't planned for this, but this happened because people would get sick in the middle of the semester and miss 2-3 weeks of, classes, and they'd be attending from Zoom. And then others, would say things like, oh my, I got a flat tire while coming to class, so I'm going to take class online. So teachers had to teach real students in class as well as attend to students on Zoom. We did have the technologies for it, but we didn't have the training for it. So that was something. So here are some challenges we had for clinical training. We had students who were anxious to learn teletherapy, challenges of teletherapy and in-person therapy with younger patients were prevalent. So, I'm sure you understand that, that it's a 2.5-year-old child. The child is not sitting in front of the camera your entire session, but the same was a problem if they had to mask in person. We had other challenges. Sorry, let me see if I can go back. We had challenges with older patients with technology access, as well as coming to in-person therapy, anxiety of being in hospital, reduced number of externships. And like I said, having some space and good online connection to even do teletherapy was difficult. And then finally, doing diagnostics online was a whole new, arena. We bought online tests, and we had guided Zoom sessions, and it was hard to determine which was better, doing assessment with masks or doing assessments online. So this is my last slide, and I'm going to finish up by saying there were some real positives. As you can see, what is highlighted here is we all learned to be flexible, and that we got support from our college. We got financial support, and we got support with consistent guidelines as to how to be safe. So thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to learn so much from all of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for highlighting the transitions that have taken place in clinical as well as academic training. You also explained the preparedness measures that you have adopted at your center in order to accommodate the patients. It was indeed very impressive to note the virtual resources which have been used for the purpose of clinical training as well as academic training. And it was very interesting also to see that you have spoken about the effect of COVID-19 on research. Thank you very much for an informative session, ma'am. We will now move towards the panel discussion.
Oh, wonderful faculty. Thank you, Professor Nandu, Professor Raut, and Professor Iya for giving the other side of the word. Message is very clear. We all are sailing in the same boat. Everybody has a challenge. Everything is same. When you said you have internet issues, we should not be cribbing about India is bad. So it's a universal thing, you know. We have changed a lot, but I think I don't have very direct questions because everybody's role is little different. One is administration, one is a professor in dedicated area and all that. But as a generalized perspective, I want to ask about it. When we design any curriculum or any program, we always think about giving knowledge in breadth and depth of any area. Okay. So do you think with this all flexi program, are we reaching out to that level? So my question is first to Professor Rao.
Sure. Actually, thank you, by the way, Dr. Manke. It's nice to talk to you. So it is challenging. The simulation is great, but does not give you the depth, number one. When we're training clinicians, we are looking at knowledge as one component, skill as another component. So when we do simulated learning or simulation exercises, knowledge can be achieved, but skill, the interpersonal skills, the bedside manners, the professional communication, those things are very hard to achieve. And that's why having these hybrid models are kind of taking over now in this pandemic era.
Okay, thank you. Professor Nandu, please. Can't hear.
You're muted.
That happens all the time during Zoom classes, and this was premeditated here. So yes, I totally agree with Dr. Raut that giving the knowledge, sharing the knowledge has not been much of a problem. But did they get that skill? And am I able to test that skill? Can I test the competence in them? That has been quite a challenge. And in fact, one batch has graduated now who had 75% of an online education. And I really worry about their performance. They may have their grades to be the best, but their clinical skills may not be as competitive as their previous batch. So how skilled are they? That will remain a question. And they'll just have to learn on the go and get some hands-on experience while they're working without harming anyone. Luckily, we do not have any surgical procedures, but you still can harm someone doing an endoscopic evaluation. So I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that they get the practical skills while they're working and evolve as a mature clinician.
Know that. Professor Hia, please.
So kind of in the same vein as the others, I'd like to bring in the point that it also depends on the patient group that we're talking about. So, when you said endoscopy, I was thinking dysphagia and swallowing and, not even go there with the harm that can be done to the patient. But on the other hand, these students learn two skills, at least, under our supervision. They learn how to do face-to-face therapy some, and they learn how to do teletherapy. And I cannot say enough about lack of services. In India, in United States, you wouldn't, know, like in rural places, people travel whatever number of miles to get to a speech pathologist. Now, this is not okay, particularly for little children. And if we can make teletherapy not just something we kind of grabbed onto because the pandemic knocked us out, but something intentional, much can be achieved. But we have to be, careful about which groups of patients we are saying this works for. And that piece I totally agree with Nandu.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, you please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, but in terms of theoretical training, much has to be said about how much we need to be in person in class versus what can be achieved online too. Again, depends on what subject matter we're talking about, what kind of students we're talking about. So we shouldn't, I don't know that we should just go back and be like we were pre-pandemic through and through. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Nobody wants to revert the clock, go back to the same thing, because this has given us wonderful opportunities. But I personally feel we need to be more critical and analytical. Are we really hitting the target? Now, simple thing, what I see about, I just read CA and CFCC guidelines and all other things. They are not ready to lower the standard anyway. Okay, that gives a strong message. Just for our audience purpose, I just want to make it clear. See, in India, our speech and hearing programs are approved by RCI. So once you are graduated from A program versus B, all are treated as equal. So, and you are entitled to get RCI registration or certificate as such. Versus in United States, you graduate from A program versus B, they are not equated at all. You need to go through this ASHA certification procedure, or properly, follow step by step. And those your grades, clinical hours, and everything are evaluated as a third party. Am I right? It means like whether you have achieved those, clock hours or not, all those things, your certification is analyzed properly. So what I mean to say is, the statement is which is true for any time series. Any time it will be stand for clinician. Reducing standard could pose potential risk to students and clinical fellows who may not be competent and for quality practice. So we are clinical people, we are delivering the service to people, so the contact with the other person. So our norms have to be at this level always, and the bar has to go up and up. But I'm just questioning about it, like, that was there any moment or things like you develop a dialogue with Asha that please lower the standard, please allow us, give us more time? Was there any this kind of a discussion across the country? Professor Raut, please.
Sure. Actually, I was involved in a planning group meeting actually with ASHA, with the director of certification and other program directors. And one of the main issues was how many simulated clinical hours was ASHA going to allow? Because, and then the second part is who's going to count those hours, or how are we going to count those hours? Because if we assign a simulated exercise, a student said, yeah, I did it, but what is the accountability? But ASHA kind of realized, and like you have said before, that this pandemic actually has accelerated what everybody was doing at a different level in terms of simulation, but now everybody has to do it. So ASHA kind of said, okay, for speech pathology, right now we are counting clock hours. For audiology in the United States, we are not counting hours anymore. A year and a half ago, it was 1,820 clinical hours. Now it's competency based. So we have to check each competency, make sure everything is accounted for, and about 10% can be simulation. So ASHA has kind of leaned a little bit to help the programs and students. Yes.
Professor Nandu, do you think with the time ASHA has to bend, or because see, it has affected the student population, it has affected to run the program by itself, even like, beneficiaries may also will have reservations that I don't want to have a face-to-face meet, it's not from our side. The clients will say, no, we don't want to come to your place, or something online. So do you think that there is going to be a big sea change in our thought process, or how do you foresee 5 years from now?
Right away after this semester, after summer, we are going back to our offices. We are going to have face-to-face classes. That's the mandate that's been given in Texas, and I'm sure elsewhere too. So it looks like we are out of the box, getting out of the cubicle here at home and going and teaching in person. I've had my clients, patients, even the geriatric population asking for face-to-face sessions, and they are tired of Zoom. So looks like we are going to go back to what was so-called normal and teach face-to-face and see patients in person. What could happen with the third wave if the Americans wake up and realize, yes, we are in the pandemic world and not in a fantasy world, then things could get complex. As any acoustician know, when you have several waves with several frequency, you're going to have a complex wave and things are going to get complex. So we will cross that bridge when the third wave hits Americans really hard. And then we may think about another lockdown. But for now, we are going face to face and everything is sounding to be normal, even though we are not.
And now coming to this teletherapy part as such, now everybody is into teletherapy as such. And as I understand, you have a HIPAA guidelines, clients' privacy and all other things are supreme important. That's not something at our end. We do talk about it, but there's nothing like a documentation. So are there some guidelines developed by ASHA or university how to conduct a teletherapy program? Or do we, as the university has developed the guidelines for it, Professor?
Yes, we actually do have guidelines at the university level, and those are actually based on the general guidelines from ASHA. And the two sets of guidelines are different for different programs. For example, for speech pathology, it is slightly different. And like Hia was talking about, depends on the client base we're talking about. For audiology, it is becoming a lot more common to program hearing aids through distance teleprogramming. So there are companies actually are coming up who are doing these things, absolutely totally telehearing care. So yes, at the university level, we have implemented, because Hia and Nandu were both talking before, distance is a problem for the elderly patients in the US, and they don't have transportation to come to the clinic. And if we have hearing aid programming, or if we can deliver some of the therapies, or at least maintain the communication, instead of seeing them once a week for speech therapy, maybe we can see them once a month and still maintain the quality. So yes, at the university levels, we do have those guidelines.
Professor Nandu, is it something same across the university board, or every university has different guidelines? Or is there any common thread for the guidelines?
Yes, since we have to stick to ASHA guidelines to keep up with our credentialing, we do have similar guidelines. The way we approach the goal could be different, but the guidelines have to be followed to keep ourselves competitive with all the other programs across the country.
Okay, thank you. Now the question comes about, is the hybrid approach is the way forward, or, and if at all it is, how to make it 50-50 or 60-40, 30-70, how the hybrid approach is going to be. Here for you, please.
For going forward is your question. So
we are talking about hybrid now. So way forward, how do you see yourself? Which way the weightage will be?
I think, like we've been talking about, like you said, we are not definitely going back 100% in person, but how much of it, what proportion we're going to have telepractice, what proportion in person, those things haven't been decided yet. Also because you were talking about guidelines. So not only do we have ASHA guidelines, but we have our government guidelines via which we can, be on campus or not on campus. Some of those things will only become 100% clear maybe in August, because our new session will start in September. So, I mean, I totally see us doing some level of telepractice, but I think that for all the reasons that Dr. Radhakrishnan cited, we will, of course, continue to have a lot of in-person.
The question is, how do you yourself personally, not as a policy or anything, what is a good combination you see yourself in hybrid? Means like 30% telepractice and 70% as face-to-face, or 50-50, or of course, with the disability it may vary, but as a general, your perspective, your personal perspective, I'm looking at it.
My personal perspective probably would be 20 to 30% for students, I mean 20 to 30% telepractice, because that would, give them some variety between, say, adult and children in telepractice, and leave sort of the majority in sort of majority of proportion of the experience for them to move from in-person site to site. And that is also very valuable. I kind of, so if you ask me, I feel that telepractice is now a fourth leg in our clinical sort of model, which is initially you guide the student within your campus. Like in Aish, we had clinical practice in on campus. That's the first thing, and you nurture them a lot, and then they go to 2 external sites where they have even less guidance, and that's one type of experience. And then telepractice is like a fourth leg, which in my head now we should have done before, maybe like 10%, maybe everyone should have had at least one telepractice client, but we didn't. And now maybe that's what we should think about, because it is an important skill to have.
You see, though digital technology means United States being very advanced, you had never thought about online 100% training in 2017 or 2019. Pandemic forced you to go into, Zoom and all other things.
I mean, interestingly, in our program, we did have some hybrid theory classes. For example, I was teaching hybrid in the master's program, I don't know, for like maybe 4 years now. And it's, again, for some classes, it actually works well, where they're very like knowledge-based classes, where anatomy, you have to learn it. There is no like, I think, the larynx is actually in the abdomen, and somebody says, no, I have evidence that that doesn't work. It is where it is. Versus maybe the more clinic classes, the clinical disorder classes, the classes where students are being trained to do an oral periph exam. That kind of stuff, we were very limited teaching those. So we were doing some things even prior to the pandemic. And now I think one of the things that we are all struggling with to know is this training, how does this training compare to a traditional training? And we need studies on that, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Professor Nandu, what is your perspective about this hybrid model?
Yes, from my perspective, I have been teaching online for the certificate program in vocology since 2018. That's 100% online. But coming to a hybrid version or face-to-face, as we're going to have from fall, even though we say it's going to be face-to-face, faculty here in the US have the flexibility to deliver the way they want it to, as long as they have delivered everything. I'm going to do it face-to-face, but I'm going to keep all my recorded videos as a backup and going to upload it on Blackboard, the software platform that we use, and teach on campus in class, and let my students know that there are recorded videos. If you have any questions or want to replay this class, go back and watch those videos. This is going to cut down my office hours, because if students have questions, even before they can come to my office, they're going to watch the video. So they get the same lecture twice. That can enhance their learning. So I believe that having all these recorded versions will help me take a day off if I'm sick, or if I want to say that I'm sick and just take a nap at home, I can do that. And students have the advantage of watching that particular video n number of times. So face-to-face is the way, but hybrid should be kept as a backup, both to face the pandemic world and for students who want that extra hour of lecture once again.
I appreciate your, what's his vision about self-learning. Self-learning is something, for ages, everybody has been talking about. But I always feel those who are motivated will do self-learning. Others will, no matter what kind of material you make it available, it's no. So you are very optimistic that your all recorded material will be observed and all. It will be a good research by itself. Yeah, it will be interesting. Thank you.
Yes, I will not keep it as a primary mode of delivery, but that would be something that if they want, they can go back and watch.
Yeah, and, that's right. Yeah, true. Thank you. Professor Rao, peer group learning has its own role always, whether it's in a school age or junior college or professional thing. People always learn from each other with the same thought process, not as the teacher and student role as such. This has been really a missing element. That's what I feel all the time in peer group learning. So how do you envision see these can be strengthened in this online program? How do you, or is there any attempt is made from your programs or university programs? How do you see that?
Sure. This is a great conundrum, actually, but we are getting there. And I'm amazed at, at the level, the proficiency of the current students with which they engage with technology. I mean, these kids are so good. They instinctively know way more than actually one of the best things about this pandemic is I have learned more from my students than they have learned from me, particularly on technology. And coming back to small groups, Zoom will have breakout sessions, breakout groups, and these students instinctively, they will get into breakout sessions. And I actually, when I teach or I have lab meetings, we actually do assign an administrator co-host for a student, and that person takes over, and it is amazing. Thankfully, I don't have to do anything. But coming back to my personal bias, that I am an old school person, and I personally prefer the one-on face-to-face communication, mentoring, engagement. But looking forward, I think 80-20, 80% in-person, 20% supplemental, or 75-25 will be a really good moving forward break-even point, sort of the way we go. Because if you look at any curriculum, speech or audiology, there are 25% of classes that can be easily taught online through seminars and discussions. But then there are other classes, it is very difficult to kind of transmit the knowledge and skills. So yes, that's my short answer.
Okay, so I think everything has to come an end now. I can ask you 10 more questions, but I think I'm getting a feeler from Dr. Natraj here. So anyway, it has been wonderful discussion as such. Thank you, Professor Rao, Dr. Hia, and Dr. Nandu. One thing I just felt good about it, problems are universal. Indians should not be feeling sorry, that we are at on disadvantage side as such. Everybody has done the marvelous job in given current situation, because it just everything was a challenge. We just did not know what is the next month is going to be. It's not about the COVID itself, but just making the process onward, how I'm going to make it meaningful and all, because we are answerable to students. They have paid the fees, they have sort of the goal, they cannot defer their graduation or something. So time-bound program has to be done. So people are doing good job, and I think there is a lot to learn from each other. So thank you so much. And over to Dr. Natraj. Thank you giving this wonderful. I'm full of praise about like the way you have, Dr. Natraj, you have framed the entire webinar. Hats off to you. You thought so differently. It's a kaleidoscope. It's different angles you have given to it. So wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Throughout the session, a lot of learning has taken place, informations have been exchanged, and now we have got clearer insights into how COVID-19 has affected the different spheres of our profession. It was indeed a lively session. We saw various solutions being discussed which can be utilized to overcome the challenges which COVID-19 has imposed on our profession. So it was a wonderful session. I thank the panelists as well as the moderator. On behalf of JSS Institute of Speech and Hearing, I kindly request the resource persons as well as the moderator to accept the certificate of appreciation. Firstly, I would request Dr. Nandu Radhakrishnan to accept the certificate as a token of appreciation for being the resource person in today's webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I request Dr. Ayaskanta Raut to accept the certificate for being a resource person in today's webinar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I request Dr. Datta to accept the certificate as a token of appreciation for being a resource person in today's webinar. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Request Dr. Kalyani Manke to accept the certificate for being the moderator in today's session. Thank you, ma'am.
Can I add a word here?
Yes, sir.
Most of these students, especially in India, will be missing the opportunity of taking selfies in a webinar.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So,
I also
We will have a group.
we will have a session, sir. We will have a group photo now.
We will have a group screenshot at the end of this webinar. We have planned it.
I do want to say that one of the ups of this was I attended so many talks and so many conferences in the last year compared to what I've been able to do in I don't know how many years going in person. And they were all free too. And because of that, international. I mean, it could have been at 9 p.m. at night or 2 a.m. in the morning, but hey, I mean, learning from people around the world, that was great.
I now request if there is any student representative who would like to share their experiences regarding online classes or online teaching. If there are any, kindly indicate to us by raising your hand or writing in the chat box.
Ma'am, good evening.
Yes, Nitya, would you like to share your experiences?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to talk about the pros and cons of online classes in the
just a minute. Nitya Sridhar is currently pursuing her first MSc Audiology at JSS ISH Mysore. So yeah, go ahead, Nitya. You can please share your experiences.
I am going to share my experiences in terms of pros and cons with the perspective of a student. So first, let's see what are the pros that we students think about for online classes. First is the safety factor. During this pandemic, it is very difficult for us to come sit for offline classes and attend face-to-face classes. So this online class has given us an opportunity to sit at home.
Please.
And with safety, we can attend classes. That is one point. The second point is due to the advanced technology, even during this pandemic difficult conditions, we students are facilitated with classes and we are indulged in classroom activities. And the third thing is there'll be more of student and teacher interactions, and we are learning more of time management. And the sessions will be recorded, so the recorded sessions are available for us so that we can access to it whenever we require it, as told in the panel discussion. The cons are, though we are exposed to more of clinical workshops and webinars, we are missing out that client exposure and clinical hands-on training. That is one thing. And most of us face internet issues. We face software and device glitches. That is one point that I need to add on here. And due to the online classes that are going on, the screen time for all of us is being increased too much. So due to this increase in the screen time, the attention and concentration of students in the class is being decreased. That is one point. And one more is, as we are not facing any pen and paper test or examination, we are unable to evaluate our own performances through the academics throughout the course. This is what I feel about the online classes, the pros and the cons. And I thank you, ma'am and sir, for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you for sharing your experiences and the pros and cons of online teaching. I would also like to know if there are any participants who would wish to share their feedback or would like to share their thoughts regarding the webinar. If any, may please indicate by raising their hand or by mentioning in the chat box. Uh, 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 okay, I don't think anyone is ready. So, yeah. I now request Dr. N.P. Nataraja to give the closing remarks on today's session.
No. Yeah, no. First of all, I would like to submit my pronouns to His Holiness Sri Swamiji. I must say, I had a very interesting and overwhelmed with the response that I got. I would like to share some of the things which I experienced. Sometime in the last week of May, Dr. Kalyani Mandke had texted that what is going to happen to the clinical program, training programs, and what about the evaluation of the students, and all these questions. When I read that, I felt, of course, I used to think about this earlier. Once she wrote like that, it made me to think of creating a platform for that purpose. So immediately, I thought of this webinar. Of course, I approached my management, Mr. Mahesh, Director of Medical Education, my immediate boss. And as usual, he gave green signal to me to have this webinar. Then I contacted my colleague, Dr. Saramsh, and told him that we are going to do something like this, and he should be coordinating along with Mr. Vipin and Mrs. Sanjana. He is an enthusiastic person, and the whole team was an enthusiastic team. So I started thinking seriously about the possible resource persons. And I kept thinking about it and started contacting one by one. I called Dr. Rashekar and told him that we have been thinking like this. He said, Madi Mestre, go ahead. Then I contacted Professor Rangsai, Dr. Kalyani Mandke, then Dr. Mallikarjun, and then, of course, Ranjit, like that. But of course, by that time, I was the victim of COVID-19. So I started finding it difficult to coordinate this whole program. So immediately I called Dr. Asha and requested her to help in this process. And I told Saramsha also to coordinate along with Rasha and to hold this. And of course, but they planned almost everything, all the panels and the topics and all that. Of course, I kept asking them the progress and I kept getting the information. And of course, last 2 days, I have realized how lucky I have been. I have been very lucky to have friends like you. I mean, I never ask anybody else to take part in this. As soon as I asked each one of you, you have responded so promptly and said you are willing to take part. I'm very grateful to you all for helping me in fulfilling my dream rather. I had visualized that we should do something like this. And so I have been able to achieve that. As soon as I called each one of you, you people have been so positive and you people have spent so much of your time and put in so much of effort and with great sincerity, you people have prepared your lectures and spoken today. And of course, it has not been just among us only. More than 600, 700 participants have listened to you all. It is a great thing for us, rather. It is really, I don't know how to express my gratitude to you people. It has been a wonderful 2 days that we had. Apart from that, I am lucky enough to have support from my teachers and seniors like Dr. Ratna and Professor R.K. Oza. As soon as I called them over phone and told them that we're planning like this and they should also be a part of it, they were immediately happy to take part in this and took part in this. And of course, as I told you, the coordinators, Dr. Saramsh, Dr. Asha, Mr. Vipin, and Sanjana, and other staff members also have been very helpful to me in making this a great success. I thank each one of you personally for sparing your time, effort, and of course, putting in so much of effort rather, and making it a great success. I'm very grateful to you all. I also thank all the participants, and I hope and wish they've enjoyed and learned things from this and how difficult it has been for the institutions administratively, as explained by many of you, and of course, as academicians, as told by you, as practitioners, as explained by some of my friends. It has been a very different, unique experience. And I'm so happy that we had people from academics, administration, clinical practice, and of course, at the end, we had our student also speaking to you all about this. And I'm very grateful to you people for all the help, for the cooperation that you extended. Again, I would like to say I'm very lucky and thankful to you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Raj Shekhar to share his views regarding the webinar, please.
Okay. Thank you anyway for giving me the opportunity. I must say, first of all, hearty congratulations to Dr. Nataraja and team for the wonderful webinar that they've organized. I would say this is a real international. That is international in terms of the theme, which is really global, affecting everybody. In terms of the resource persons, right? We had excellent three, resource persons, talking on the different perspectives, and international organization in terms of, how you people went about, disseminating the information. And I would say that, it's amazing that Dr. Nataraja could rope in so many big guns, or I would say luminaries, or the known personalities of our specialty in a record turnaround time of less than 1 week. It just looks as if he just spoke to me yesterday, and then there was no communication. I thought, it's going to be dormant, but then suddenly you start getting your emails and saying your schedule is this, that. I think that is possible only by a great leader and a great team to support the leader. Okay, and who all he has roped in, right from the Rishi Sringar, that is Dr. Ratna, to Bhishma Pitamaha, that is our Professor Ramesh Oza, to the iron ladies of the profession. I'm talking about Rupa, Pushpa, Kalyani, Madhuri, all the iron ladies. And with this Corona, right, it knew that we're going to talk about Corona, and they knew that he is the leader, so that playing spoil sport by, catching, like we say, Shani Bandi Hidita then theory. Like you say, similarly, I think it caught, okay, Professor Natarajan said, look here, you're organizing something for me, so I want you to experience that. But it was, his luck, I would say, and the JSS that, Dr. Asha could, really step in beautifully. She's a good administrator. She's had, administrative capacity, and also she's done so much of administration. Even Aish, she could, step in easily and see that everything went on without any stacking of the flow. And he could also, rope in our philosophical Mallikarjuna Rao, okay, who is a blend of our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, and as well as our, Chief Minister over here in Europe, and out of the box thinker Rangasai, and not to forget about the Man Ki Baat from Satyapal Goswami. Okay, I think he got all these people around, and I think it was a real feast to the participants in terms of 2 days of varied discussions, presentations, the sessions, the panel discussions. I think everything was so well tuned that I think we could lap up most of and we could in fact visualize ourselves in that position. Okay, be it the faculty or the students or the administrators, all of us could really feel that what we are going through was discussed. I think we also got a lot of tips about how do we handle it. I must thank the international faculty for giving us a lot of resource, right, material for people to to go through it, and then of course maybe you should plan it. You make it for your requirements. Okay, and I think a big round of applause should go last to Sanjana Singh, who held the fort. Yes. Right from the beginning, as Nandu rightly said, he said she's the one who gets 100% attendance because she couldn't leave. All of us could leave and join back, but she's one who couldn't leave. And not to forget Saransh Jain, who has been also been the backbone, but he is an unsung hero. Nobody saw him, in fact, but he was the one, I think, who was doing all the communication. A great job, and I must thank you all. A great show by JSS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Participants, kindly note that a link has been posted in the chat box. Kindly provide your feedback so that we can improvise on ourselves better the next time we host such a program. So kindly provide your names and kindly check if the spellings are correct, as a certificate will be auto-generated to the email ID that you provide. I now request all the resource persons to switch on their videos so that we can have a small photo session.
So you can change your view also from speaker view to gallery view, so that all can be accommodated in one particular screenshot.
Thank you all.
No. Where should you go for that? The view, something you said?
View, sir.
Okay, the view here.
Yes,
you
sir.
go to the gallery view, right?
Yes,
Gallery. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I think I have forgotten to appreciate the hard work put in by Suma, the principal, who also happens to be my student. Suma, I haven't forgotten you. So, okay, I appreciate your efforts too in this.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you all for attending to this.
Captured?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Ayushkanta, Jai Jagannath. Bhog chadao.
How are you?
Fine.
Yeah, it was a really well done webinar and conference. Congratulations to everybody. It's an honor to be here and share my perspective. I'm happy to do it anytime for anybody, even if I have to wake up really early in the morning, not a problem. I sleep 4 hours to 5 hours a night. That's all I need. So if anybody needs me to help out anytime, please feel free to reach out. And one last thing I'll say is that there is a really nice thing about us, people who grew up in India and who are from India. Jugaad. Jugaad works everywhere. And when people, the students in the United States, complain about the littlest things, oh, I don't have my bandwidth, you are buffering. Students in India keep carrying on with little phone on WhatsApp, education goes on. And that is a remarkably high achievement for people who are going to school in India. It's amazing. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, in Karnataka, it is said Swalpa adjust madi.
Swalpa adjust
madi is a standard.
I'm refreshing on my Kannada these days. So I have recent PhD students from Aish. So they're saying, yeah, Kannada gottilla nimge. So I'm just picking up my Kannada now.
Incidentally, Ravi Anantanarayan was my batchmate.
Yeah.
In Purdue.
Purdue, right.
Yeah, we keep in touch. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Asha, great job done.
Yes.
It was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I may also request Professor Nataraja and Asha to go in for a kind of follow-up on some of the recommendations, which can take it forward at the next level.
Right.
And I can either, in whatever way you want, I can be supportive and creating documents.
Yes, we will definitely do whatever that we can. Of course, once I recover, I will start again thinking of all the possibilities. And of course,
So, Dr. Nataraj, can you also tell them about our journal, sir?
pardon me?
Can you tell the participants on all the resource people about our journal?
Yeah, you can
Contribute
go
to our
ahead.
journal.
You please go ahead, announce.
Okay. With sir's blessings, JSSI has started a journal, and this is our 20th year. So we are launching this journal as a part of our 20th year celebration. Some of y'all are in the board over there and are already aware of it, the editorial board. I request everybody to subscribe and to give an articles over there. The content and everything is on the JSS website. So you would find information about there, and we would really appreciate if you could put in your thought processes and write about what you presented here also, and we could put it in the journal. It would go through an editorial board. Of course, it will be get reviewed by two people. It will be blind reviewed. So after that, it would get published. So we'd really appreciate if you all would in your articles. It doesn't have to be only you did, it could be anything else also.
Yes. Good. All the best and congratulations for coming out with the
And please
Yeah.
take care and take adequate rest. Mr.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
thank you. Thank you.
we pray for recovery,
Thank
and
you.
then all of us, the resource persons, when we come to Mysore next time, we'll all be invited for a dinner in Nalpaka.
Sure. Definitely.
I also request all the participants, I have given permission to all the participants to switch on their video so that we can have at least a group picture with all of you. So all the participants here, please switch on your videos.
Only few are seen.
Yes, sir.
It's really nice to see Asha ma'am not fully retired. It's amazing that you came back.
I can see Rohit and Dhanshri also.
Yes.
I
Where is
was happy for your retirement, but I was sad for the speech and hearing in India. But I'm so glad to see Dr. Yatiraj back doing what she loves to do. And students are lucky.
My first destination students, Iskant. Thank you.
Yes, my mentor.
Dhanshri looks so very different now.
She is now, wizened with knowledge. She was a former student of EOIJ, and then she came on to Manipur. Yes. And for information, Ayushkanta, Dr. Asha is the Margaret Thatcher of the audiology in India. Margaret Thatcher.
Agreed.
Right? The Iron Lady. Namaskara, Pushpa.
Good to see. I know. Good to see Pushpa madam also there.
Yes.
Good evening,
the flagship.
sir. Good
The
evening.
flagship. Namdu flagship.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, ma'am. How are you?
Fine. Thank you. Hi, Iskant.
Hello. I got your text message, Puspaka. Nice.
Yeah, in between I messaged. I was trying for here also. I didn't get her, but could get you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
all the participants.
Thank you all.
It was a wonderful journey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you
We
very much.
wish you all a good day.
Thank you.
Nandu
Thank you.
and,
Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Ayaskanta and Hia, wish you all a good day and enjoy your
Thank
day.
you very much. And
Most important,
enjoy
take care. Okay.
With all of you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Thank you all, resource persons,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Sir, take care of yourself well, sir. So when we get back, we will meet in person.
Very
Bye.
true. Very true. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Raja. Bye.